It's your time to step down, Della. Ron and I are moving in, and it's only fair you find a smaller place, now that you're alone. Marla said with a deceptive sweetness that didn't quite reach her eyes. The words hung in the air like a bitter aftertaste, shattering the illusion of our supposedly happy family gathering. I struggled to maintain my composure, my heart thumping as I glanced at the smug expressions of my stepdaughter and her new husband. Greg's untimely passing had left a void in our lives, and I'd naively hoped we could move forward as a united family. But Marla's announcement made it painfully clear that she had ulterior motives, her eyes glinting with a sense of entitlement that sent a chill down my spine. I appreciate your concern, Marla, I replied, forcing a tight smile. But this is still my home, and I have no intentions of leaving any time soon. Ron cleared his throat, leaning back in his chair with an air of smugness. Well, the way I see it, you're just a temporary guest here. Greg left this place for his blood family, not some stepmom he picked up later in life. My jaw clenched at his disrespectful tone, but I refused to take the bait. Greg's will had been frustratingly ambiguous regarding the house, a loophole I knew Marla would exploit with her cunning manipulations. That's enough, Ron, I said firmly, meeting Marla's gaze with unwavering resolve. I think it's best if you two leave. We'll discuss this another time, preferably with cooler heads. Marla's lips curled into a sneer as she rose from her chair, her eyes narrowing with disdain. Don't think for a second that I'll let this go, Della. This is my rightful inheritance, and I won't let you stand in my way. As they stormed out, the weight of Marla's words sank in, triggering a flood of memories from our past confrontations. She had always been a master manipulator, playing the victim while subtly undermining my relationship with Greg. And now, with him gone, she saw an opportunity to seize control, oblivious to the consequences of her actions. Steeling my resolve, I knew I couldn't let her win this battle. Marla had underestimated my determination, and I was prepared to do whatever it took to protect what was rightfully mine and teach her a lesson she wouldn't soon forget. With trembling hands, I poured myself a glass of wine, seeking solace in the familiar warmth of the burgundy liquid. Marla's audacious announcement had left me reeling, but I refused to let her see the depths of my distress. As I settled into the plush chair in my home office, the weight of the evening's events came crashing down. Marla had always been a thorn in my side, her entitled attitude a constant source of friction within our family. But this brazen attempt to seize control of the home Greg and I had built together was a new low, even for her. I took a sip of wine, grimacing at the bitter aftertaste that mirrored the emotions swirling within me. Anger, betrayal, and a burning desire for retribution all vied for dominance, fueling a determination I hadn't felt in years. Memories of past confrontations with Marla flooded my mind, each one a stark reminder of her manipulative nature. The way she had twisted situations to paint herself as the victim, turning Greg against me with her crocodile tears and false accusations. It was a pattern I had foolishly ignored for too long, blinded by my love for Greg and the hope that she would eventually mature. But now, with Greg gone, Marla saw an opportunity to strike, her true colors shining through like a venomous snake shedding its skin. And I, the naive stepmom, had unwittingly played right into her hands by underestimating her ruthlessness. Not this time, Marla, I muttered, downing the rest of my wine with a newfound resolve. You've made your move, but I'm far from checkmate. I knew Marla's financial irresponsibility was her Achilles heel, a weakness I could exploit to turn the tables on her machinations. Greg's will might have been ambiguous about the house, but I had the foresight to protect myself by ensuring any transfer of ownership would be contingent on meeting specific legal conditions. Conditions I knew Marla would struggle to uphold. A sly smile crept across my face as a plan began to take shape. Marla wanted the house? Fine. I would let her have it, but on my terms. And when the time was right, when her reckless spending and entitlement caught up with her, I would be there to watch her crumble under the weight of her own hubris. Revenge, they say, is a dish best served cold. And I intended to make Marla's downfall a deliciously chilling affair, one that would teach her the harsh lessons of karma and consequence, lessons she should have learned long ago. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the scent of determination as I sat across from my lawyer, Sarah, at our favorite local cafe. Her sharp features and no-nonsense demeanor had always put me at ease, a reassuring presence in the face of Marla's escalating antics. "So, let me get this straight," Sarah said, leaning back in her chair and studying me intently. "Marla not only demanded you vacate the house, but her husband had the audacity to imply you're just a temporary guest?" I nodded, my jaw clenching at the memory of Ron's disrespectful words. "That's the gist of it. Marla's made it abundantly clear that she intends to take over the property, regardless of my wishes or the legal implications." Sarah shook her head, a humorless chuckle escaping her lips. "Unbelievable. That girl has always been a piece of work, but this takes the cake." "You're telling me," I agreed, taking a sip of my coffee. "But I'm not about to let her get away with it. I want to explore every legal avenue available to prevent her from pulling this stunt." Sarah's eyes gleamed with a mixture of admiration and determination. "I'm glad to hear it, Della. Frankly, you've been too lenient with her in the past. It's time we fight fire with fire." As Sarah outlined my options, a plan began to take shape. While Greg's will had been frustratingly vague, there were still loopholes I could exploit to maintain control of the situation. If Marla wanted the house so badly, I would let her have it, but on my terms. "Here's what we'll do," I said, leaning forward with newfound conviction. "We'll draft a contract stating that ownership of the property will be transferred to Marla, but with specific conditions tied to the mortgage payments and upkeep costs." Sarah nodded, a sly grin spreading across her face. "I like where you're going with this. We'll include clauses that will be difficult for her to maintain, given her financial irresponsibility." "Exactly," I replied, a sense of satisfaction washing over me. "And when she inevitably fails to meet those conditions, the house will revert back to my control, along with any legal repercussions for her breach of contract." Sarah let out a low whistle, her admiration evident. "Della, you're a force to be reckoned with. I can't wait to see the look on Marla's face when she realizes she's walked straight into your trap." As we hammered out the details, a sense of vindication surged through me. Marla had always underestimated my resilience, mistaking my kindness for weakness. But now, she would learn the hard way that crossing me had severe consequences. "Let the games begin," I muttered, a wry smile playing on my lips as I imagined the look of shock and outrage on Marla's face when she realized the true extent of my machinations. The air was thick with tension as I watched the movers carry box after box into the house I had called home for so many years. Marla's smug expression was a stark contrast to the sadness etched onto her husband Ron's face, a hint of guilt flickering in his eyes as our gazes met. "I hope you're happy now," I said, unable to mask the bitterness in my tone. "You've finally gotten what you wanted." Marla scoffed, tossing her hair over her shoulder with a dismissive flick of her wrist. "Don't be so melodramatic, Della. This is just the natural order of things. You had your time, and now it's ours." I bit back a scathing retort, reminding myself to play along, for now. Sarah's careful legal maneuvering had ensured that Marla's so-called victory would be short-lived, and I intended to savor every moment of her impending downfall. As the last of my belongings were loaded into the moving van, I took one final glance around the house, committing every detail to memory. The walls that had witnessed countless family gatherings, the kitchen where I had prepared countless meals, the living room where Greg and I had spent countless evenings cuddled together on the couch. A pang of sadness tugged at my heart, but I quickly pushed it aside, steeling my resolve. This was no longer my home. It was merely a battlefield, and I was a seasoned warrior, ready to wage war against Marla's hubris. "Well, I suppose this is it," I said, turning to face my stepdaughter with a practiced calm. "The house is all yours, Marla. I hope you'll take good care of it." Marla's lips curved into a smug smirk, her eyes glinting with a sense of triumph that made my blood boil. "Don't worry, Della. I'll make sure to keep everything in tip-top shape. After all, this is my rightful inheritance." I forced a tight smile, resisting the urge to wipe that smug grin off her face. "We'll see about that," I muttered under my breath as I climbed into the waiting van. As we pulled away from the house, I couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation bubbling within me. Unbeknownst to Marla, I had already set the wheels in motion for her inevitable downfall. A quick call to a trusted real estate agent had ensured that the property would be closely monitored, with any potential issues or foreclosure proceedings promptly reported to me. And with the carefully crafted legal conditions Sarah had woven into the transfer agreement, it was only a matter of time before Marla's financial irresponsibility caught up with her. A sly grin spread across my face as I settled into the plush seat of the van, already envisioning the look of shock and dismay on Marla's face when she realized the true extent of my machinations. "Checkmate, my dear," I murmured, watching as the house, and Marla's false sense of victory, disappeared in the rearview mirror. The modest apartment felt like a sanctuary, a haven from the chaos and betrayal that had plagued my life in recent weeks. As I unpacked the last of my belongings, a sense of calm washed over me. A calm that was tempered by a simmering determination to see my plan through to its inevitable conclusion. I had chosen this place strategically, a comfortable yet unassuming abode that would lull Marla into a false sense of complacency. She had always been one to judge based on appearances, and I knew she would revel in the idea of her once formidable stepmother being reduced to such modest living quarters. Little did she know that this was all part of my carefully orchestrated scheme. As I settled onto the plush couch, a wry smile tugged at my lips. Sarah had worked her legal magic, weaving a web of conditions and clauses into the transfer agreement that would prove to be Marla's undoing. It was only a matter of time before her reckless spending habits and financial irresponsibility caught up with her, setting the stage for the ultimate comeuppance. The sound of my phone ringing jolted me from my reverie, and I couldn't help but chuckle as I glanced at the caller ID. It was my trusted real estate agent, Cynthia, the woman tasked with keeping a close eye on the house and any potential issues that might arise. "Hello, Cynthia," I answered, my voice brimming with confidence. "I trust you have some good news for me?" "You know me too well, Della," Cynthia replied, her tone laced with a mixture of amusement and admiration. "It seems your stepdaughter has already started making waves. The bank has been in touch, reminding her about the upcoming loan renewal and the importance of maintaining a spotless credit history." I couldn't help but let out a satisfied chuckle. The loan renewal clause had been a stroke of genius on Sarah's part, a ticking time bomb that would detonate the moment Marla's financial house of cards came crumbling down. "Excellent," I said, leaning back into the couch's plush embrace. "Keep me updated on any developments, won't you, Cynthia? I have a feeling things are about to get very interesting." "You can count on it," Cynthia assured me. "I'll be sure to keep a close eye on the situation and report back any juicy details." As I ended the call, a sense of anticipation coursed through my veins. The trap had been set, and Marla was blissfully unaware of the snare tightening around her. All I had to do now was sit back and wait for her inevitable missteps to trigger the collapse of her ill-gotten gains. With a contented sigh, I reached for the remote control and turned on the television, eager to lose myself in mindless entertainment as the wheels of my revenge continued to turn in the background. "Enjoy your victory while it lasts, Marla," I murmured, a sly grin etching itself onto my features, "because when the dust settles, you'll be the one left picking up the pieces." The sound of shattering glass echoed through the once pristine hallways, punctuated by Marla's shrill screams and Ron's futile attempts to placate her. As I stepped through the front door, the scene that greeted me was one of utter chaos. A stark contrast to the orderly home I had maintained for so many years. "You idiot!" Marla shrieked, her face contorted with rage as she hurled a vase across the room, narrowly missing Ron's head. "How could you let this happen?" Ron cowered like a scolded puppy, his shoulders slumped in defeat. "I'm sorry, babe," he mumbled, his voice trembling with fear. "I thought we had more time to get our finances in order." I cleared my throat, announcing my presence with a calm that belied the inner satisfaction coursing through my veins. "Is everything all right here?" Marla whirled around, her eyes blazing with a mixture of anger and humiliation. "You!" she spat, jabbing an accusatory finger in my direction. "You did this, didn't you? You set us up with those ridiculous loan conditions, knowing we'd never be able to keep up." A wry smile tugged at the corners of my mouth as I took in the scene of Marla's unraveling. The once immaculate living room was a testament to her descent into chaos, with overturned furniture and shattered knickknacks strewn about like casualties on a battlefield. "I have no idea what you're talking about, Marla," I replied, feigning innocence. "This is simply the consequence of your own actions, or should I say, inactions?" Ron's eyes darted between us, a flicker of understanding dawning in their depths. "Babe, maybe she's right," he ventured cautiously. "We've been living way beyond our means, ignoring all the warning signs." Marla's jaw tightened, her nostrils flaring with indignation. "Don't you dare take her side," she hissed, rounding on her husband with a fury that made him flinch. "This is all part of her twisted game. She's been plotting against us from the start." I couldn't help but chuckle at the irony of her words. "You give me far too much credit, Marla," I said, taking a step closer. "The only game being played here is the one you started when you tried to take what wasn't rightfully yours." Realization began to dawn on Marla's face, her eyes widening as the pieces fell into place. The loan renewal clause, the meticulous monitoring of the property's value, the mounting debt that had spiraled out of control, it had all been a carefully orchestrated trap, and she had waltzed right into it. "You knew," she whispered, her voice laced with a mixture of awe and fury. "You knew I'd never be able to keep up with the payments, and you let me take the house anyway." I nodded, savoring the taste of her defeat. "Of course I did, dear. You see, I've learned a thing or two about the consequences of greed and entitlement over the years, lessons that you, unfortunately, have yet to grasp." As Marla sank to the floor, her carefully constructed facade of superiority crumbling around her, I couldn't help but feel a sense of vindication. The scales of justice had finally been balanced, and the price of her hubris had been paid in full. The air was thick with tension as I surveyed the wreckage of what had once been a pristine living room. Marla sat on the floor, her shoulders slumped in defeat, while Ron hovered nearby, his expression a mixture of guilt and resignation. "Well, well, look at the mess you've made," I said, my voice laced with a mix of triumph and pity. "And to think, this could have all been avoided if you'd just learned to control your entitlement and greed." Marla's head snapped up, her eyes blazing with fury. "Don't you dare lecture me, Della," she spat, her words dripping with venom. "This was all part of your twisted little revenge scheme, wasn't it?" A wry smile tugged at the corners of my mouth as I met her gaze unflinchingly. "Revenge? Now why would I need to seek revenge against my own stepdaughter?" Ron shifted uncomfortably, his gaze darting between us like a spectator at a particularly intense tennis match. Maybe we should all just take a deep breath and... "Shut up, Ron," Marla snarled, cutting him off mid-sentence. "This has nothing to do with you." I couldn't help but chuckle at her outburst. "You see, Marla, that's where you're wrong. This has everything to do with the both of you and your complete disregard for consequences." Marla opened her mouth to retort, but I held up a hand, silencing her. "No, let me finish. For years I've watched you manipulate and scheme, always taking what you wanted without a second thought for the fallout. You tried to turn Greg against me, you tried to take this house that wasn't rightfully yours, and all the while you've been living beyond your means, racking up debt like it was a badge of honor." Ron's brow furrowed as he processed my words, and I could see the realization dawning in his eyes. "Wait, so those loan conditions, the monitoring of the property value, that was all you?" I nodded, a sense of satisfaction washing over me. Indeed it was. I knew Marla's reckless spending habits would eventually catch up with her, so I simply facilitated the process. Marla's face contorted with rage as she struggled to her feet, her fists clenched at her sides. "You manipulative bitch," she seethed, her voice trembling with barely contained fury. "How dare you try to take what's rightfully mine?" I couldn't help but laugh at the irony of her words. "Rightfully yours? Marla, you've never understood the concept of hard work and sacrifice. This house, this life that you so desperately coveted, was built on the foundation of my blood, sweat, and tears. Greg may have left the ownership of this property ambiguous, but he knew in his heart who truly deserved it." As my words sank in, I could see the fight draining from Marla's body, her shoulders slumping in defeat. Ron, ever the passive accomplice, simply stood by silently, his expression a mixture of awe and resignation. "You played me," Marla whispered, her voice barely audible. "You let me think I had won, only to pull the rug out from under me." I nodded. a sense of vindication washing over me. Yes, I did. And you know why? Because sometimes the only way to teach a lesson is through harsh, uncompromising consequences. As I turned to leave, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of pity for the broken woman before me. Marla had been her own worst enemy, her greed and entitlement blinding her to the reality of her actions. But as they say, karma is a bitch, and Marla had just learned that lesson the hard way. The soft ticking of the clock was the only sound that punctuated the silence as I sipped my tea, savoring the warmth and tranquility of my modest apartment. It had been several months since the fateful confrontation that had shattered Marla's delusions of grandeur, and in that time my life had settled into a comfortable routine. A knock at the door jolted me from my reverie, and I couldn't help but feel a twinge of apprehension as I rose to answer it. Peering through the peephole, my breath caught in my throat. It was Marla, looking more disheveled and defeated than I had ever seen her. Steeling my resolve, I pulled open the door, meeting her gaze with a measured calm. "Marla," I greeted, keeping my voice even, "to what do I owe this unexpected visit?" She shifted uncomfortably, unable to meet my eyes. I need your help, Della," she mumbled, the words seeming to stick in her throat. I raised an eyebrow, fighting back the urge to gloat at her admission of vulnerability. "My help? After everything that's happened, you still have the audacity to ask for my assistance?" Marla flinched as if I had struck her, her shoulders slumping in defeat. I know, she said, her voice laced with a weariness that tugged at my heartstrings. "I was a complete monster to you, and I don't deserve your kindness." Sighing, I stepped back and gestured for her to enter. "Well, you might as well come in and explain yourself." As she settled onto the couch, I couldn't help but notice the shadows under her eyes and the pallor of her skin, telltale signs of the stress and turmoil she had endured in recent months. "I've hit rock bottom, Della," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "After losing the house and everything else, Ron left me. My credit score is in shambles, and I can barely make ends meet." A flicker of sympathy stirred within me, tempered by the lingering resentment of her past transgressions. "And what do you expect me to do about it?" I asked, my tone neutral. Marla's eyes glistened with unshed tears as she met my gaze. "I need guidance, Della. I need you to teach me how to pick up the pieces and start over, the right way, this time." For a long moment I studied her, searching for any hint of deceit or manipulation, but all I saw was a broken woman, humbled by the harsh lessons of consequence and karma. Finally I nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of my mouth. "All right, Marla, I'll help you, but on my terms. This won't be an easy road, and you'll have to follow my lead without question." Relief washed over her features, and she nodded eagerly. "Anything, Della. Just tell me what to do." As I outlined the steps she would need to take, budgeting, rebuilding her credit, finding steady employment, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. Not for the revenge I had exacted, but for the opportunity to guide Marla onto a path of redemption and self-growth. "It won't be easy," I cautioned her. "But if you truly commit to this journey, I promise you'll emerge stronger and wiser than ever before." Marla nodded, her eyes shining with determination. "I'm ready, Della. I've learned my lesson, and I won't squander this second chance." As she left, a weight seemed to lift from my shoulders, replaced by a sense of hope for the future. Revenge might have been the catalyst that set us on this path, but in the end, it was about more than just retribution. It was about teaching the harsh lessons of life and giving someone the opportunity to rise from the ashes of their mistakes, reborn and renewed, and for that, I would always be grateful. I stared at the innocuous brown package on my kitchen counter, feeling a sinking sensation in my gut. Another one. The third this week, all containing random items I never ordered or wanted. A set of cheap steak knives, a floral silk scarf, and now a garish ceramic vase. My heartbeat quickened as I scanned the plain wrapping for any clues, but just like the others, there was no return address or identifying information. "What's going on?" I muttered under my breath, running a hand through my graying hair. A strange, gnawing feeling told me this was no mere mix-up at the mail depot. The sound of the doorbell jolted me from my thoughts. I peered through the peephole to see the familiar face of my niece, Cora, smiling back at me. A wave of relief washed over me as I ushered her inside. "Aunt Sage, you look spooked," Cora remarked, her brow furrowed with concern. What's wrong? Without hesitation, I recounted the bizarre series of mystery packages, laying out the contents on the kitchen island. Cora's eyes widened as she examined each item, her fingers tracing over the intricate patterns on the vase. This is really weird, she murmured. Have you tried calling the companies or tracking the shipments? I nodded, feeling a lump form in my throat. That's the thing. There are no order numbers, no invoices, nothing. It's like these packages just materialized out of thin air. Cora's expression hardened, her jaw set in determination. We need to get to the bottom of this. Maybe we should install some security cameras around the house, just in case. Her suggestion ignited a spark of unease within me. Could someone be targeting me? But who and why? Flashes of old family tensions flickered through my mind, but I quickly brushed them aside. Surely it couldn't be related to those ancient grudges. You're right, I finally agreed, steeling my resolve. Let's get those cameras set up. If someone is behind this, we'll catch them red-handed. As we worked together to mount the cameras, a sense of unease lingered. But deep down, I knew I had to unravel this mystery, no matter where it led. After all, I was Sage Allen, retired teacher, community leader, and no stranger to facing challenges head-on. Whatever storm was brewing, I would weather it with the same resilience that had carried me through life's ups and downs. Over the next few days, Cora and I meticulously installed the security cameras, positioning them to cover every potential entry point around my modest home. The uneasy knot in my stomach refused to dissipate, and Cora's presence provided little comfort as we pored over the footage, searching for any suspicious activity. That's when we saw him, a figure lurking in the shadows, his face partially obscured by the darkness. But there was no mistaking that familiar gait, the slight hunch of his shoulders that I'd recognize anywhere. Frederick, I breathed, my fingers tightening around the computer mouse as if it were a lifeline. Cora's eyes widened. You mean your cousin? The one who's been in and out of trouble ever since we were kids? I nodded grimly, memories of Frederick's past misdeeds flooding back. Petty theft, fraud, even a stint in jail. He'd always been a black sheep in our family, constantly seeking shortcuts and exploiting loopholes for his own gain. But why now? I wondered aloud. What could he possibly want from me after all these years? Cora's brow furrowed as she zoomed in on the grainy footage, studying Frederick's furtive movements. Well, whatever it is, it can't be good. We need to be careful, Aunt Sage. A shiver ran down my spine at the stern tone in her voice. Cora had always been level-headed, but there was a newfound severity in her demeanor that unsettled me. Over the next few days, the packages kept arriving, each more bizarre and unsettling than the last. A set of expensive crystal wine glasses, a designer handbag still wrapped in plastic, even a sleek laptop that must have cost a small fortune. With each delivery, my unease grew, and I found myself jumping at every creak and shadow. It was during one of our nightly stakeouts that Cora made a startling discovery. Look at this, she said, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she pulled up a news article from a neighboring town. There have been reports of similar incidents, people receiving random high-value packages they never ordered. My heart sank as I scanned the article, recognizing the all-too-familiar pattern. You don't think. Cora's expression was grim. Frederick's name is all over this. It looks like he's been running some sort of twisted scam, sending people valuable goods, and then trying to extort money from them. Rage bubbled within me, hot and visceral. How dare he drag our family name through the mud once again with his selfish, criminal antics? But beneath the anger, a sliver of fear took root. If Frederick was truly behind this, what lengths would he go to in his pursuit of ill-gotten gains? We need to stop him, I declared, my voice trembling with resolve. Whatever it takes, we can't let him get away with this. Cora nodded, her eyes gleaming with determination. Don't worry, Aunt Sage. We'll bring that scumbag down, even if we have to catch him in the act ourselves. As we began plotting our next move, a sense of grim purpose settled over us. Frederick had crossed a line, and he would soon learn that messing with Sage Allen was a grave mistake, one he wouldn't soon forget. In the days that followed, Cora's online digging unveiled a troubling pattern. Frederick's name cropped up time and again, linked to similar schemes across multiple states. Packages filled with random, high-value items would arrive at unsuspecting victims' doorsteps, only for Frederick to surface later, demanding payment under the guise of settling bogus debts. The sheer audacity of his con left me reeling. How could he stoop so low? I muttered, pinching the bridge of my nose as the evidence mounted on Cora's laptop screen. I knew he was troubled, but this is a whole new level of depravity. Cora's expression hardened, her jaw set in a tight line. Clearly, he's spiraling out of control. We need to put a stop to this before someone really gets hurt. Her words struck a chord deep within me, dredging up memories I'd long tried to bury. Frederick's descent into petty crime and shady dealings had been a source of constant tension within our family, driving an irreparable wedge between his parents and the rest of us. I could still hear the echoes of heated arguments, accusations hurled back and forth like daggers. "He's just a kid, Sage. Boys will be boys," my aunt would plead, her eyes desperate for understanding. But my mother's gaze would remain steely, unwavering. "That kid is a menace. Mark my words, he'll bring nothing but trouble to this family." At the time, I had dismissed their words as mere hyperbole, the overblown ramblings of adults caught up in their own drama. But now, faced with the undeniable evidence of Frederick's misdeeds, I couldn't help but wonder if those long-buried enmities had finally taken root, blossoming into something far more sinister. "Why now, Frederick?" I found myself whispering, my fingers tracing the faded pages of an old family photo album. "What do you want from me after all these years?" Beside me, Cora's fingers flew across the keyboard, her brow furrowed in concentration. "I think I might have found our answer," she murmured, her voice laced with a mixture of disgust and triumph. On the screen, a news article flashed, a mugshot of Frederick, his expression defiant even as the headline blared details of his latest arrest. Fraud, embezzlement, racketeering. The charges were staggering, painting a portrait of a man drowning in a sea of debt and desperation. "He's broke," Cora surmised, her eyes meeting mine with grim understanding. "And you know what they say about people with nothing left to lose." A chill ran down my spine as the pieces fell into place. Frederick's sudden resurgence in our lives, the escalating packages, the brazen attempts at extortion, it all led back to one inescapable conclusion. He was targeting me, his own flesh and blood, in a last-ditch effort to claw his way out of the pit he'd dug for himself. As the realization washed over me, a wave of steely resolve rose within my chest. This was no longer just about packages or petty scams. This was a battle for the soul of our family, a reckoning long overdue. And Frederick was about to learn that karma had finally come calling, with a vengeance. The packages kept coming, each one more extravagant and valuable than the last. A gorgeous diamond tennis bracelet, a top-of-the-line laptop, even a sleek virtual reality gaming system, still sealed in its box. With every delivery, my sense of unease grew, morphing into a simmering rage that threatened to boil over. It was during one of our nightly vigils, poring over the security footage, that Cora's phone trilled with an incoming call. She shot me an apologetic glance before answering, her expression quickly shifting to one of concern. "Theo, what's going on?" she asked, her brow furrowing as the voice on the other end crackled through the speaker. Theo was an old family friend, a veteran cop who had always looked out for us. If he was calling at this hour, it couldn't be good news. Slow down," Cora urged, waving me over to listen in. "You're saying you found something on Frederick?" My heart lurched at the sound of his name, and I leaned in closer, straining to catch Theo's words through the tinny speaker. "Deep in debt, over his head with some real nasty characters," Theo's gruff voice echoed. "Looks like he might be trying to pull off some kind of scam, targeting someone close to him for a big score." Cora's eyes met mine, a silent understanding passing between us. Of course, it all made sense now. Frederick's desperate financial situation, his sudden reappearance in our lives, the escalating packages. It was all part of an elaborate scheme to bilk me out of every penny I had. "That low-life son of a—" I muttered, my fists clenching involuntarily. The sheer audacity of his plan, the betrayal of targeting his own family, ignited a fury within me unlike anything I'd ever felt before. Cora placed a gentle hand on my arm, her touch grounding me in the moment. "Thanks for the heads up, Theo," she said into the phone, her voice steely with determination. "We'll handle it from here." As she ended the call, a weighted silence hung between us, thick with unspoken tension. Finally, Cora broke the stillness, her words slicing through the air like a knife. "We have to stop him, Aunt Sage, no matter what it takes." I nodded, my jaw set in a grim line. "Absolutely. That snake has gone too far this time." A plan began to take shape in my mind, a daring gambit that would force Frederick to show his true colors once and for all. But to pull it off, we'd need help. Someone with insider knowledge, someone Frederick would never suspect. "Call your cousin Blake," I instructed Cora, my voice leaving no room for argument. It's time we brought the rest of the family into this. As Cora dialed the number, I felt a surge of grim satisfaction coursing through my veins. Frederick had made a grave mistake in underestimating me, in thinking he could slither his way back into our lives and bleed us dry without consequence. This time, there would be no more second chances, no more empty promises of reform. This time, justice would be served, and Frederick would finally answer for his litany of sins against our family. The annual Allen family reunion was always a boisterous affair, a chance for distant relatives to gather and catch up over heaping plates of Mom's famous potato salad. But this year the cheerful banter and laughter felt forced, a thin veil barely concealing the undercurrent of tension that crackled through the air. As I scanned the crowded backyard, my gaze landed on Frederick, holding court in the corner with a small cluster of cousins. His booming laugh grated against my nerves, and I felt my hands ball into fists at my sides. This couldn't go on any longer. Exchanging a meaningful glance with Cora, I steeled my resolve and began weaving through the throngs of people, making a beeline for Frederick's little coterie. As I drew closer, his eyes met mine, and for a fleeting moment, I saw a flicker of unease cross his features before his trademark smirk snapped back into place. Well, if it isn't my dear cousin Sage," he drawled, raising his beer in a mock toast. "To what do we owe the pleasure?" I felt the eyes of the others upon me, their gazes curious, expectant. This was it, the moment of truth. "Cut the crap, Frederick," I spat, my voice low and dangerous. "We know what you've been up to with those packages." A hush fell over the group as Frederick's smirk faltered, his bravado slipping for the briefest of moments. But just as quickly, he regained his composure, letting out a dismissive chuckle. "Packages? What are you on about, Sage? You're starting to sound a bit paranoid in your old age." The jeers and snickers from his little entourage only fueled my anger, and I felt my pulse quicken as I stepped closer, invading his personal space. "Don't play dumb with me," I snarled, jabbing a finger into his chest. "We have evidence, video footage of you sneaking around my property, the paper trail linking you to similar scams across the country. It's all there, clear as day." Frederick's eyes widened, and for a moment I thought I saw a glimmer of panic flit across his features. But just as quickly, he schooled his expression into one of feigned indignation. "These are serious accusations, Sage," he scoffed, puffing out his chest in a show of bravado. "You'd better have some solid proof before slandering my good name like this." A tense silence hung in the air, thick and suffocating. This was the moment, the chance to back down, to defuse the situation and walk away. But as I met Frederick's defiant glare, something inside me snapped. "You're right," I growled, my voice dripping with venom. "I do have proof, and I'm going to make sure the whole family sees it." With that, I whirled around and stormed away, leaving a stunned Frederick in my wake. As I marched back towards the house, Cora fell into step beside me, her expression a mix of concern and admiration. "That was intense," she murmured, her eyes wide. "Are you sure you want to do this, Aunt Sage? There's no going back after this." I didn't hesitate, my mind made up. Absolutely. It's time for Frederick to face the consequences of his actions once and for all. As we made our way inside, I could feel the weight of 1,000 eyes boring into my back. But I didn't care. This was about more than just packages or petty scams. This was about justice, about reclaiming our family's dignity from the clutches of a man who had squandered it for far too long. And as I dialed Theo's number, I knew that the reckoning had finally arrived. The next few days were a flurry of activity as Cora, Theo, and I put the final pieces of our plan into motion. We knew Frederick would be monitoring the situation closely, waiting for his next opportunity to strike. And that's precisely what we were counting on. "Are you sure you want to go through with this, Sage?" Theo asked, his brow furrowed with concern as he triple-checked the hidden cameras we'd planted around my property. This guy seems like bad news. I don't want you getting caught in the crossfire. I met his gaze, my jaw set in determination. I'm sure, Theo, it's time we put an end to Frederick's games once and for all. Cora stepped forward, her expression mirroring my own resolute demeanor. We've got your back, Aunt Sage. This scumbag isn't going to know what hit him. With a sharp nod, Theo signaled that everything was in place. All right then, let's get this show on the road. The bait was simple, another high-value package, this time containing a sleek, top-of-the-line drone with all the bells and whistles. We knew Frederick wouldn't be able to resist such a tempting prize, and sure enough, within hours of the delivery, the security feeds crackled to life. There he was, skulking around the periphery of my property, his eyes darting back and forth like a cornered animal. My heart pounded in my chest as I watched him inch closer, his movements furtive and calculated. He's going for it, Cora whispered, her fingers tightening around the edge of the laptop screen. We held our breath as Frederick crept up to the front porch, snatching the package with a greedy swiftness before retreating back into the shadows. But this time, he wasn't getting away so easily. That's our cue, Theo growled, his hand already reaching for his radio. Let's move in. In a blur of motion, we sprang into action, Theo's team of officers converging on my property from all sides. Frederick's eyes went wide as the net closed in around him, and for a moment I almost felt a twinge of pity at the sheer terror etched across his features. Almost. Frederick Allen, you're under arrest for fraud, extortion, and a whole host of other charges, Theo barked, his tone leaving no room for negotiation as he slapped the cuffs around Frederick's wrists. You have the right to remain silent. But Frederick wasn't going down without a fight. As the officers hauled him towards the waiting squad car, he craned his neck in my direction, his eyes burning with a poisonous mixture of rage and desperation. You think this is over, Sage? He spat, his words laced with venom. You have no idea what you've just stepped into. This is just the beginning. A shiver ran down my spine at the implicit threat in his voice, but I refused to show any outward sign of fear. Not now, not after everything we'd been through to get to this point. Save it for the judge, Frederick, I countered, my voice steady and unwavering. Your reign of terror is over. As the squad car peeled away, leaving a cloud of dust in its wake, I felt a strange sense of relief wash over me. The weight of Frederick's looming presence, the constant anxiety and uncertainty, had finally been lifted from my shoulders. But even as I basked in the momentary triumph, a nagging voice in the back of my mind reminded me that this was far from over. Frederick's parting words echoed like a sinister promise, a harbinger of storms yet to come. Cora must have sensed my unease because she stepped forward, wrapping her arms around me in a fierce embrace. Don't worry, Aunt Sage, she murmured, her voice thick with conviction. We've got this. Whatever comes next, we'll face it together. And in that moment, surrounded by the unwavering support of my family, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would emerge victorious. Because when it came to defending our loved ones, there was no force on earth that could stand in our way. The atmosphere at the Allen family reunion was electric, charged with a palpable tension that crackled through the air like static electricity. As I scanned the crowd gathered in my backyard, I could see the whispers, the furtive glances in my direction. Everyone was buzzing about the events of the past week. Frederick's dramatic arrest, the topic on everyone's lips, part of me felt a twinge of guilt at the prospect of airing our dirty laundry in such a public forum. But the other, larger part of me knew that this was a reckoning long overdue, a chance to finally expose Frederick's misdeeds and hold him accountable for the pain and chaos he'd sown within our family. Cora must have sensed my inner turmoil because she leaned in close, her voice low and reassuring. You ready for this, Aunt Sage? I took a deep breath, steeling my resolve, and gave her a curt nod. More than ready. It's time we put an end to this once and for all. With that, I stepped forward, my movements commanding the attention of the assembled crowd. A hush fell over the gathering as all eyes turned towards me, a heady mixture of curiosity and apprehension hanging thick in the air. Family, I began, my voice ringing out clear and strong. I know you're all wondering why I've called this little impromptu get-together today. The truth is, there's something that needs to be addressed, a cancer that has been festering within our ranks for far too long. A ripple of murmurs swept through the crowd, but I pressed on, undeterred. For years we've turned a blind eye to the actions of one person, a man who has shown time and again that he has no regard for the sanctity of our family or for the values we hold dear. I paused, letting the weight of my words sink in. I'm talking, of course, about Frederick. At the mention of his name, a palpable shift occurred, as if a collective gasp had been sucked from the lungs of every person present. Frederick's supporters shifted uncomfortably, their gazes darting back and forth while others leaned forward, rapt with attention. Some of you may have heard whispers about his recent activities, I continued, my voice hardening. The packages, the scams, the outright extortion attempts. Well, I'm here to tell you that it's all true, and we have the evidence to prove it. With a sharp nod to Cora, she queued up the video footage we'd compiled, the large screen behind me flickering to life with grainy images of Frederick skulking around my property, his movements furtive and guilt-ridden. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd as the damning footage played out, each frame more incriminating than the last. And then, the pièce de résistance, the video of Frederick's arrest, his snarling face contorted with rage as the cuffs clicked around his wrists. As the footage concluded, a heavy silence hung in the air, thick and oppressive. All eyes were on me, 1,000 unspoken questions burning in their gazes. Finally, a voice broke through the stillness, trembling with barely contained emotion. Is it true? Frederick's mother croaked, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Did you really do all those terrible things, son? For a long moment, Frederick said nothing, his gaze fixed on the ground, his shoulders slumped in defeat. But then, almost imperceptibly, he nodded, a barely perceptible dip of his chin that spoke volumes. I didn't have a choice, he muttered, his voice tinged with a mixture of defiance and shame. I was drowning, backed into a corner. Sage was the only one who could help me out of this mess. A chorus of gasps and outraged cries erupted from the crowd, but I remained stoic, letting the damning truth of his words hang in the air like a noxious cloud. As Frederick was led away, his footsteps echoing hollowly across the yard, I felt a profound sense of relief wash over me. The cancer had been excised, the festering wound finally lanced and drained. But even as I basked in the momentary triumph, I knew that our work was far from over. This was just the first step in a long journey, a journey to heal the rifts that had been torn open within our family, to rebuild the bonds of trust and kinship that Frederick had so callously shattered. And as I looked out over the sea of faces, their expressions a kaleidoscope of emotions ranging from shock to anger to grim determination, I knew that we would emerge from this trial stronger than ever before. Because at the end of the day, we were Allens. And no matter what storms raged around us, our family would weather them together, united and unbreakable. The weeks following Frederick's arrest were a whirlwind of activity. With his confession and the damning evidence we'd gathered, the case against him was airtight. He was slapped with a laundry list of charges: fraud, extortion, racketeering, you name it. As the full extent of his crimes came to light, the family was left reeling, struggling to come to terms with the depths of his betrayal. But through it all, I remained steadfast, channeling my energy into something positive, a mission to ensure that no one in our community would ever have to endure the kind of trauma and turmoil that Frederick had inflicted upon us. It started small, with a few neighborhood watch meetings and workshops on recognizing the signs of elder abuse and financial exploitation. But as word spread of our efforts, the momentum grew, drawing in more and more volunteers eager to lend their voices and their time to the cause. You know, when all this went down, I was really worried about how it would impact the community, Theo admitted one evening as we strategized over cups of lukewarm coffee. But look at what you've managed to build here, Sage. It's incredible. I shook my head, a wry smile tugging at the corners of my lips. I'm just doing what needs to be done, my friend. After everything we went through with Frederick, I couldn't sit idly by and let others fall victim to the same kind of predatory behavior. Cora, ever my stalwart ally, chimed in with a proud grin. My aunt, the unstoppable force for good. Who would have thought your retirement would lead to all this? We shared a laugh at that, the warm camaraderie a balm for the lingering aches and pains of our recent ordeal. But even in those light-hearted moments, I never lost sight of the larger mission at hand. The real work began in earnest a few months later, when our grassroots efforts caught the attention of the local authorities. Before I knew it, I found myself sitting across the table from the district attorney herself, outlining our plans for a comprehensive community outreach and education program. "What you've accomplished so far is admirable, Miss Allen," the DA said, her eyes shining with a mixture of respect and determination. "But we can take this even further. With the right resources and support, we can implement preventative measures on a much larger scale, protecting vulnerable populations across the entire county." And just like that, our humble neighborhood watch evolved into something far grander, a full-fledged initiative with backing from law enforcement and local government agencies. Suddenly we had access to funding, publicity campaigns, and a platform to reach thousands upon thousands of residents. The days blurred together in a flurry of town hall meetings, educational seminars, and one-on-one consultations. I found myself crisscrossing the county, sharing our story and imparting the hard-won lessons we'd learned from our confrontation with Frederick's depravity. And through it all, I could feel the tides shifting, a groundswell of awareness and empowerment rippling through our communities. Elderly residents, who had once been easy targets for scammers and con artists, were now armed with the knowledge and resources to protect themselves. Families were having open and honest conversations about financial security and safeguarding their assets. It was during one of our packed community forums that the true impact of our efforts really hit home. As I scanned the sea of faces before me, I saw a tapestry of humanity. Young and old, from every walk of life, united in a common cause, and in that moment, I knew that we had achieved something truly special. This was no longer just about bringing Frederick to justice or settling old scores. This was about creating a lasting legacy, a bulwark against the kind of predatory behavior that had nearly torn our family apart. And as the thunderous applause washed over me, I felt a profound sense of pride and purpose swell within my chest, because in the end, that's what truly mattered. Not the trials and tribulations we'd endured, but the way we had risen above them, emerging stronger, wiser, and more resilient than ever before. We were no longer victims, but warriors, armed with the knowledge and the determination to protect what mattered most, our loved ones, our community, our very way of life. And as I looked out over that crowd, I knew that our work was far from over. But with each life touched, each person empowered, we were building something truly special. A legacy that would endure long after the sting of Frederick's betrayal had faded from memory. A legacy of strength, resilience, and an unwavering commitment to justice and community. A legacy worthy of the Allen name.